Dr. Amara Johnson walked into the courtroom that Tuesday morning with her head held high. She wore a dark blue suit that she had pressed the night before. Her hands held a brown leather folder filled with papers. Inside that folder were documents that proved she was the best person to take care of her niece, Zara. The little girl was only 7 years old and had nowhere else to go. Amara's sister had died 6 months ago in a car accident. It was sudden and terrible. Zara's father had never been in the picture. He left before Zara was even born. So Amara stepped up. She loved that little girl like her own daughter. For the past 6 months, Zara had been living with her. They had created a routine. They cooked breakfast together. They read books before bed. Zara was finally smiling again after losing her mother, but Zara's grandmother on her father's side wanted custody too. The woman's name was Patricia Brennan. She had hired a fancy lawyer. The lawyer's name was Richard Brennan. He was Patricia's son. He wore expensive suits and had slicked back hair. He smiled a lot, but his smiles never reached his eyes. Amara sat down at her table. She had a lawyer too, but her lawyer was young and nervous. His name was David Chen. He was fresh out of law school and doing his best. Amara knew David was trying hard, but she could see he was worried. The judge in this case had a reputation. People whispered about him in the courthouse hallways. Judge Harold Whitmore entered the courtroom. Everyone stood up. He was a tall man in his early 60s. His hair was gray and perfectly combed. His black robe seemed to make him look even bigger and more powerful. He had been a judge for 30 years. People said he was tough. People said he was fair. But some people said other things too. They said he had old-fashioned ideas. They said he treated people differently based on how they looked. The hearing began. David Chen presented Amara's case first. He talked about her education. Amara had a PhD in linguistics from Cambridge University in England. She had studied there for 4 years. Before that, she went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. She graduated at the top of her class. She spoke 9 languages fluently. She had worked as a translator for the United Nations. She had traveled to more than 30 countries. David explained that Amara had a good job. She was a professor at the State University. She taught language classes. Her students loved her. She had great reviews. She made good money. She owned her own home. It was a 3-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Zara already had her own room there. The walls were painted pink. There were toys and books everywhere. Judge Whitmore listened, but his face showed no emotion. He wrote notes on a yellow legal pad. Sometimes he looked at Amara. His eyes seemed to judge her in ways that had nothing to do with the case. Then it was Richard Brennan's turn. He stood up slowly. He buttoned his suit jacket. He walked toward the center of the courtroom like he owned it. He started talking about his mother, Patricia. He said she was a retired school teacher. He said she had raised 5 children of her own. He said she went to church every Sunday. He made her sound like a saint. But then Richard Brennan changed his approach. He started attacking Amara. He said she was too busy with her career. He said she traveled too much for work. He said a child needed stability. He questioned whether Amara really understood what it meant to be a mother. Amara felt her jaw tighten. She wanted to speak up. She wanted to defend herself. But David had told her to stay quiet unless the judge asked her questions directly, so she sat there and took it. Richard Brennan kept going. He picked up a paper from his table. He looked at it and then at the judge. Your Honor, Ms. Johnson claims to speak 9 languages. 9 languages. That seems like quite an exaggeration, doesn't it? Amara's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her language skills were documented. They were verified. She had certificates. She had test scores. She had letters from her professors and employers. Judge Whitmore looked up from his notes. For the first time that morning, he seemed interested. He leaned back in his big leather chair. A small smile appeared on his face. It was not a kind smile. 9 languages, Ms. Johnson? The judge said. He took off his reading glasses and cleaned them with a small cloth. That does seem rather impressive. Perhaps too impressive. Amara felt her heart start to beat faster. She knew that tone. She had heard it before in her life. It was the tone of someone who had already decided she was lying. The tone of someone who thought she wasn't good enough or smart enough. Your Honor, David Chen stood up quickly. Dr. Johnson's linguistic abilities are well documented. We have submitted her credentials with our initial filing. Judge Whitmore waved his hand dismissively. Yes, yes. I see papers here that say she has degrees and certificates. But 9 languages? That's quite a claim for someone with her UMA background. The word background hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the courtroom knew what he meant. He didn't mean her educational background. He didn't mean where she came from in a geographical sense. He meant something else entirely. Amara had grown up in Detroit, Michigan. She was raised by a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night. They lived in a small apartment in a neighborhood that most people drove through quickly with their car doors locked. But her mother had big dreams for her. Her mother made sure she went to school every day. Her mother checked her homework every night, even when she was exhausted from working 2 jobs. Amara discovered her gift for languages when she was 8 years old. A family from Somalia moved into the apartment next door. They didn't speak English well. Amara's mother helped them however she could. Young Amara started playing with their children. Within 3 months, she could speak basic Somali. Her mother was amazed. From that point on, Amara became the unofficial translator for her apartment building, then for her whole block. Families from all over the world lived in her neighborhood. There were people from Mexico, Vietnam, Russia, and Morocco. Amara learned bits and pieces of all their languages. She had a natural talent. Words stuck in her brain like Velcro. In high school, her guidance counselor noticed her gift. The counselor helped her apply for scholarships. Amara got into Howard University with a full ride. She studied international relations and languages. She added French, Arabic, and Mandarin Chinese to the languages she already knew. She studied abroad in Morocco and China. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge. But none of that mattered to Judge Whitmore, apparently. He looked at her and saw only what he wanted to see. He saw a black woman from a poor neighborhood. In his mind, people like her didn't speak 9 languages. People like her were lucky to speak 1 language correctly. Richard Brennan saw his opportunity. He smelled blood in the water like a shark. Your Honor, I have to agree with you. These claims seem embellished. Ms. Johnson's supposed expertise in languages is actually a central part of her argument for custody. She claims she can provide Zara with a culturally diverse education. But if she's exaggerating her abilities, what else might she be exaggerating? Amara couldn't stay quiet anymore. She started to stand up, but David put his hand on her arm. He shook his head slightly. He mouthed the words, "Not yet." Judge Whitmore was chuckling now. Actually chuckling. The sound echoed through the courtroom. It was a sound that made Amara's blood boil. It was the sound of a man who thought he was superior, a man who thought he could judge people based on the color of their skin or where they came from. Mr. Brennan raises a good point, Judge Whitmore said. He was still smiling. Ms. Johnson, I think we need to verify these claims of yours. Right here, right now. David Chen stood up again. Your Honor, with all due respect, Dr. Johnson's credentials have been verified by multiple institutions. We have documentation from Cambridge University, from the United Nations, from the Defense Language Institute. Sit down, Mr. Chen, Judge Whitmore said. His voice was sharp now. The smile was gone. I want to hear it for myself. If Ms. Johnson truly speaks 9 languages, as she claims, it should be easy enough to demonstrate. Amara felt something shift inside her. The nervousness and anger transformed into something else. It became a cold, focused determination. This judge wanted a demonstration? Fine. She would give him one he would never forget. She stood up slowly. Her chair scraped against the floor. Everyone in the courtroom turned to look at her. She smoothed down her suit jacket. She took a deep breath. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her voice would be steady. Your Honor, she said clearly, I accept your challenge. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. He rested his elbows on his desk. He clasped his hands together. That smug smile was back on his face. Excellent. Let's start with something simple. Spanish, that's common enough. Show me your Spanish, Ms. Johnson. The bailiff, a Hispanic man in his 40s, shifted uncomfortably by the door. The court reporter, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, had stopped typing. She was watching carefully. There was something in her expression. It looked like she had seen this before. It looked like she didn't like it. Amara looked directly at Judge Whitmore. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. And then she began to speak. But she didn't just speak Spanish. She spoke with the accent and precision of someone from Madrid, Spain. Her words flowed like water. Judge Whitmore expected Amara to stumble. He expected her to speak a few basic phrases and then run out of words. He expected to catch her in a lie, but as she continued speaking in perfect Spanish, his smile started to fade. His eyebrows came together in confusion. After 2 full minutes of flawless Spanish, Amara smoothly switched languages. Without warning, without pausing, she began speaking Mandarin Chinese. The tones were perfect. In Mandarin, the way you say a word changes its meaning completely.
One small mistake and you could be saying something completely different.
But Amara made no mistakes. She quoted Confucius, the ancient Chinese philosopher. She talked about education and wisdom. She discussed family values and the importance of caring for children. Her pronunciation was so clear that if there had been a native Chinese speaker in the room, they would have thought she grew up in Beijing, the court interpreter. A woman named Maria Rodriguez sat in her designated seat near the judge's bench. Her job was to translate when needed, but right now her eyes were wide with shock. Maria spoke 4 languages herself. She knew how hard it was to learn just 1 new language, let alone 9, and she could tell that what Amara was doing was real. This wasn't memorized phrases. This was true fluency, Amara continued. She switched to Arabic next. It was a language that most Americans found impossible to learn. The sounds came from the back of the throat. The letters looked like beautiful art. The grammar was completely different from English, but Amara spoke it like she had been raised speaking it. In the gallery, an elderly man who had been waiting for his own case sat up straight. He was originally from Lebanon. He understood Arabic. He found himself nodding along with what Amara was saying. She was talking about justice and fairness. She was talking about how children needed love and stability, and she was saying it all in classical Arabic, the formal kind used in literature and serious discussion. Judge Whitmore's face had changed completely now. The smugness was gone. The smile had disappeared. His face was turning red. It started at his neck and crept up to his cheeks. He looked like a man who had just realized he made a terrible mistake. But Amara wasn't finished. Not even close. She moved into French next. It was the beautiful French of Paris with the rolled R sounds and the smooth flow between words. She talked about international law. She mentioned specific cases. She used legal terms that even some French lawyers might not know. Richard Brennan, the opposing lawyer, had stopped looking confident. He was shuffling papers on his table nervously. He kept glancing at his mother, Patricia, who sat behind him. Patricia looked confused. This wasn't going the way they had planned. From French, Amara transitioned seamlessly into Portuguese. Not the Portuguese of Brazil, but the European Portuguese of Portugal. The accent was different. The vocabulary was different. And she spoke it perfectly. She discussed educational systems and child development theories. The stenographer had completely stopped typing. Her hands rested on her machine. She was supposed to record everything said in English, but right now she was just watching. She had worked in this courthouse for 15 years. She had never seen anything like this. Amara continued to Russian. It was a hard language with complicated grammar. Nouns changed their endings depending on how they were used in a sentence. Verbs changed based on gender and tense. Most people studied Russian for years and still made basic mistakes. But not Amara. She spoke about family law and international adoption standards. Every word was correct. Every sentence was perfect. Judge Whitmore had uncrossed his arms. He was leaning forward now. He wasn't taking notes anymore. He was just staring. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like a man watching a magic trick and trying to figure out how it was done. Next came Swahili. It was a language spoken in East Africa. It had a musical quality to it. Amara talked about community and the African concept of, it takes a village to raise a child. She spoke with passion and warmth. The language seemed to flow naturally from her, as if she had spoken it her whole life. By now, everyone in the courtroom was paying attention. 2 lawyers who had been waiting for the next case had moved closer to the doorway to listen. The bailiff had forgotten he was supposed to look stern and official. He was smiling despite himself. This was the most interesting thing that had happened in this courtroom in months. Amara switched to Japanese. The language was completely different from all the others. It had different levels of politeness. You spoke differently to people above you than to people below you in social status. You used different words for the same things depending on the situation. Amara navigated all of this perfectly. She discussed respect, duty, and responsibility. She talked about the Japanese educational system and how much emphasis they placed on learning. David Chen, Amara's lawyer, was grinning now. He had been nervous before. He thought they might lose this case. But now he saw a path to victory. His client wasn't just defending herself. She was dominating the courtroom. Finally, Amara moved to her 9th language, German. It was a precise language, perfect for discussing law and logic. German had long compound words. The grammar was strict and complicated. But Amara handled it all with ease. She quoted German philosophers. She discussed case law precedents from German courts. She talked about the German approach to family services and child welfare. When she finished, she paused. She had been speaking for nearly 10 minutes straight. She had cycled through 9 different languages, 9 completely different ways of thinking and communicating, and she had done it all without notes, without hesitation, without a single mistake. The silence in the courtroom was total. It was so quiet that Amara could hear the clock on the wall ticking. She could hear someone breathing heavily in the back row. She could hear the air conditioning humming. Then she turned to face Judge Whitmore directly. She looked him right in the eyes. She spoke in clear, crisp English. Her voice was calm but firm. Your Honor, language is not a reflection of someone's zip code or the color of their skin. It's a reflection of dedication, opportunity, and a refusal to be limited by other people's expectations. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, in a neighborhood that most people would call poor. But my mother taught me that education was the way out. She taught me that I could be anything I wanted to be. She paused. Judge Whitmore said nothing. He seemed frozen. I learned my first foreign language when I was 8 years old, Amara continued. I learned it because my neighbors needed help and I wanted to help them. I learned my other languages because I loved learning. I loved discovering new ways to see the world. Every language is like a window into a different culture. A different way of thinking. She gestured toward the papers on her table. I have degrees from Howard University and Cambridge. I have worked for the United Nations. I have taught at universities in 3 countries. I have translated for presidents and prime ministers. But apparently in your courtroom none of that matters as much as your assumptions about who I am, based on how I look. Richard Brennan tried to stand up. He opened his mouth to object. But Judge Whitmore held up his hand to stop him. For once, the judge seemed to have lost his voice. My niece Zara needs someone who will love her, Amara said. Her voice softened a bit. She needs someone who will challenge her to be her best. She needs someone who will show her that the world is big and full of possibilities. I can give her that. I already am giving her that. We study French together on Tuesday nights. We count in Swahili while we cook dinner. We read Japanese folk tales before bed. Amara picked up her leather folder. She held it against her chest. You asked me to prove that I speak 9 languages. I have done that. Now can we please continue with the actual custody hearing? Can we please focus on what actually matters, which is what is best for a 7-year-old girl who already lost her mother? The courtroom remained silent for a few more seconds. Then Maria Rodriguez, the court interpreter, began to clap. It was slow at first, just her hands coming together. But then the bailiff joined in, then the stenographer, then the lawyers waiting for the next case, then the elderly man from Lebanon. Even David Chen, who was supposed to stay professional, started clapping. Judge Whitmore looked around his courtroom. He saw everyone applauding. He saw the respect in their eyes. Respect for Amara. He saw something else, too. He saw disappointment in their eyes when they looked at him. He realized that everyone in this room had just watched him humiliate himself. Order, he said weakly. He hit his gavel once. Order in the court. The clapping stopped. But the mood had changed completely. This was no longer Judge Whitmore's courtroom. He was no longer in control. Amara had taken that control away from him with her knowledge, her dignity, and her refusal to be diminished. We will continue with the hearing, Judge Whitmore said. His voice sounded tired. The energy had gone out of him. He looked down at his notes, but Amara could tell he wasn't really reading them. He was avoiding eye contact with everyone. Richard Brennan stood up again. He was trying to regain control of his case. But he looked shaken. His slicked back hair wasn't quite so perfect anymore. A strand had fallen across his forehead. His confident smile was gone. Your Honor, he began. I would like to continue with my cross-examination of Ms. Johnson. Proceed, Judge Whitmore said. Amara held up the French document and began reading it out loud. Her French was perfect, flowing smoothly like a native speaker. She read through the first paragraph without stopping. Then she paused and looked at Richard Brennan. "This first error is right here," she said, pointing to a specific line. "This document claims that children under 8 cannot form secure attachments to new caregivers after losing a parent. That's completely false. Research shows that children can form healthy attachments at any age, given the right circumstances and support." Richard shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He glanced back at his mother. Patricia Brennan was frowning now. She whispered something to the person sitting next to her. Amara continued reading. She went through another paragraph. Then she stopped again. "Here's the second error. This states that bilingual households confuse young children and delay language development. That's outdated information from the 1960s. Modern research proves the opposite. Children in bilingual households often have cognitive advantages." Judge Whitmore was leaning forward again, but this time he wasn't smirking. He was listening carefully. He picked up his pen and started taking notes again. "The third error is here," Amara said, moving further down the page. "This claims that children need maternal grandmothers specifically for proper development. That's not supported by any credible research. Children need stable, loving caregivers. Those caregivers can be grandmothers, aunts, fathers, adoptive parents, or anyone else who provides consistent love and care." Richard's face was turning red. "Your Honor, I don't think Ms. Johnson is qualified to critique a professional document." "I have a PhD in linguistics," Amara said calmly. "I've published papers on language acquisition in children. I've worked with the United Nations on educational programs in 6 countries. I'm absolutely qualified to critique this document." She turned to the last page. "And here's the deliberate mistranslation. The original French word here is preferable, which means preferable. But in your English summary, you translated it as necessary. Those are very different meanings. Preferable means it's one option among many. Necessary means it's the only option. That changes the entire meaning of the sentence." The courtroom was completely silent. Everyone was staring at Richard Brennan. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, did you alter this translation?" "No, Your Honor," Richard said quickly. "I received this document from a consultant. I trusted their translation. But you presented it as evidence in my court," Judge Whitmore said. His voice was stern now. "You are responsible for the accuracy of your evidence." "Yes, Your Honor," Richard said quietly. He walked back to his table. He sat down heavily in his chair. He whispered something to his assistant, a young woman in a gray suit. She shook her head and whispered back. David Chen stood up. Amara's lawyer looked much more confident now. "Your Honor, I'd like to present additional evidence of Dr. Johnson's qualifications and her relationship with Zara." "Proceed," Judge Whitmore said. He waved his hand in permission. David called Amara to the witness stand. She walked up calmly. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat down in the chair next to the judge's bench. "Dr. Johnson," David began. "Can you tell the court about your daily routine with Zara?" Amara smiled. It was the first real smile she had shown all day. "Zara wakes up around 7 in the morning. We have breakfast together, usually scrambled eggs or oatmeal. While we eat, we practice whatever language she's interested in that week. Last week it was French. This week she wants to learn Japanese because she saw an anime show she liked." People in the courtroom smiled. Even Judge Whitmore's expression softened slightly. "After breakfast, I drive her to school," Amara continued. "I teach my first class at 9, so I make it to campus right on time. I have 3 classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. 2 classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm always done by 3 in the afternoon. I pick Zara up from school at 3:30. What do you do in the afternoons?" David asked. "We do her homework first. Then she plays for a while. Sometimes she plays in the backyard. Sometimes she watches TV. Sometimes she draws. She loves to draw. She's very good at it. At 6 o'clock, we make dinner together. She helps me cook. She's learning to measure ingredients and follow recipes. And after dinner, we read together. Sometimes I read to her. Sometimes she reads to me. She's getting very good at reading. Then we do her bath time routine. She brushes her teeth. She picks out her clothes for the next day. And then I tuck her into bed. We talk about her day. We talk about anything she's worried about or excited about. Then I read her one more story and she goes to sleep." Amara's voice was warm as she described their routine. Everyone in the courtroom could hear the love in her words. This wasn't just duty. This was genuine care and affection. Has Zara adjusted well to living with you? David asked. It was hard at first, Amara admitted. She was grieving. She missed her mother terribly. We both did. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep. There were mornings when she didn't want to get out of bed. But we got through it together. I took her to a child therapist, Dr. Sandra Mitchell. She's been wonderful. Zara sees her once a week. How is Zara doing now? Much better. She's smiling again. She's making friends at school. Her teacher says she's doing well in all her subjects. She's even joined the art club. She comes home excited to tell me about her day. That's how I know she's healing. David nodded. Dr. Johnson, Mrs. Brennan's lawyer, suggested that your career might interfere with raising Zara. What do you say to that? My career is already adjusted, Amara said firmly. I've spoken with my department chair. I've turned down a fellowship in Germany. I've declined speaking engagements in Japan and France. I've reduced my course load. My priority is Zara. I can still teach and do research, but I'm doing it around her schedule, not the other way around. Thank you, David said. No further questions. Richard Brennan stood up for cross-examination. He looked tired now, defeated, but he had to try to salvage something. Dr. Johnson, he began, you mentioned that Zara goes to therapy. Doesn't that suggest she's struggling? It suggests she experienced a trauma and needs support to process it, Amara replied. Her mother died. Of course she needs therapy. Any responsible caregiver would make sure she gets professional help. That's not a weakness. That's good parenting. Richard tried again. But if she was truly happy with you, would she need therapy? David Chen stood up quickly. Objection, Your Honor, that's not how therapy works. That's not how grief works. Sustained, Judge Whitmore said. Mr. Brennan, ask better questions. Richard looked down at his notes again. Dr. Johnson, my mother is retired. She would be home with Zara all day. You have to work. Isn't a full-time caregiver better for a child? Not necessarily, Amara said. Zara is in school from 8:30 to 3:30. She needs to be in school. She needs education and socialization with children her age. The question isn't who's available all day. The question is who can provide the best environment when Zara needs care. And you think you can provide that? I know I can, Amara said confidently. I already am. Zara's thriving. She feels safe with me. She knows her routine. She knows what to expect. She's building a life. Moving her to live with someone she barely knows would disrupt all of that progress. It would be traumatic all over again. Richard sat down. He had nothing left. His whole case had been built on undermining Amara's credibility. But she had proven herself beyond any doubt. Her credentials were real. Her commitment was obvious. Her love for Zara was clear. Judge Whitmore looked at his notes for a long time. The courtroom waited. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Someone coughed in the back row. Patricia Brennan was crying quietly. She had lost and she knew it. Finally, Judge Whitmore spoke. I'm ready to make my ruling. Everyone sat up straighter. This was the moment everything had been building toward. This case has been unusual, Judge Whitmore said. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was looking down at his desk. I have reviewed all the evidence. I have heard testimony from both sides. I have to make a decision based on what is in the best interest of the child. He paused. He took a sip of water from a glass on his desk. Ms. Patricia Brennan is a good woman. I'm sure she loves her granddaughter. I'm sure she wants what's best for her. But the evidence shows that Zara has had no relationship with Mrs. Brennan for most of her life. Moving Zara to live with her now would mean taking her away from the only stable home she's known since her mother's death. Patricia Brennan let out a small sob. Her son Richard put his hand on her shoulder. Dr. Amara Johnson has proven herself to be a capable and loving guardian. Judge Whitmore continued. His voice was flat without emotion. She has provided a stable home. She has ensured Zara receives appropriate therapy. She has adjusted her career to prioritize the child's needs. She has demonstrated both the means and the commitment to raise Zara properly. Amara held her breath. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Therefore, I am granting full custody of Zara Johnson to Dr. Amara Johnson, Judge Whitmore said. He hit his gavel once. This hearing is concluded. Amara felt tears spring to her eyes. She had won. Amara and Elena Martinez sat in a small conference room down the hall from the courtroom. The room had a wooden table and 6 chairs. The walls were painted a pale yellow. There was a window that looked out onto the parking lot. Amara could see her car from here. She wanted to go home to Zara. But she knew this conversation was important. Elena pulled out a notebook and a pen. She also had a digital recorder, which she placed on the table. "Do you mind if I record our conversation? It helps me keep accurate records." "That's fine," Amara said. She was still processing everything that had happened. An hour ago, she was standing before a judge who laughed at her. Now she had custody of Zara and was talking to someone who investigated judges. "First, congratulations on winning custody," Elena said warmly. "I could see how much you love your niece." "Thank you," Amara said. "She's my whole world now." Elena pressed the record button on the device. "Dr. Johnson, I want to ask you about what happened today in Judge Whitmore's courtroom. But before I do, I want you to understand something. You've just won your case. This investigation has nothing to do with your custody ruling. Judge Whitmore made his decision. It's final. Nothing we talk about here will change that." Amara nodded. "I understand." "Good," Elena said. "Now tell me what happened from your perspective. Start from the beginning." Amara took a deep breath. She went through the entire morning. She described how Richard Brennan questioned her credentials. She described how Judge Whitmore focused on her claim about speaking 9 languages. She remembered his words exactly. Rather impressive. Perhaps too impressive. And then the way he said, "someone with your background." "What did you think he meant by that?" Elena asked. "I knew exactly what he meant," Amara said. "He looked at me and saw a black woman. He saw where I grew up. He made assumptions. He decided I must be lying because people who look like me don't speak 9 languages." "Did he say anything explicitly about your race?" "No," Amara admitted. "He was too smart for that. He used code words. Background. Claims. The way he smiled. The way he chuckled. Everyone in that courtroom knew what he meant." Elena wrote in her notebook. "Tell me about the other people in the courtroom. Did anyone else seem to notice his behavior?" The court reporter stopped typing at one point, Amara remembered. She was watching him with this look on her face. Like she'd seen him do this before. The bailiff looked uncomfortable too. And the interpreter, Maria Rodriguez, she was the first one to clap after I finished speaking. She seemed angry on my behalf. "That's very helpful," Elena said. "I'll need to interview them as well." They talked for another 30 minutes. Elena asked detailed questions. She wanted to know every word Judge Whitmore said, every expression on his face, every tone of voice. Amara answered as honestly as she could. Finally, Elena sat back in her chair. She clicked off the recorder. "Dr. Johnson, I need to tell you something. You're not the first person to complain about Judge Whitmore's behavior." Amara wasn't surprised. "How many others have there been?" "I can't give you specific numbers while the investigation is ongoing," Elena said carefully. "But I can tell you that there's a pattern. Other people of color have complained. Women have complained. People with accents have complained. People from working-class backgrounds have complained. And nothing has been done?" Amara felt anger rising in her chest. "It's complicated," Elena said. "Judge Whitmore has been on the bench for 30 years. He's connected. He's careful. He never says anything explicitly discriminatory. It's always subtle, always deniable. And most people who complain don't have evidence as clear as what happened today." "What do you mean?" Elena smiled slightly. "You proved him wrong in the most dramatic way possible. You didn't just claim to speak 9 languages. You actually demonstrated it, in front of multiple witnesses. The court reporter has a transcript. There's probably security camera footage. This is documented. This is concrete." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't thought about cameras. "There's video? All courtrooms have security cameras," Elena confirmed. "They record everything. The audio might not be perfect, but the video will show Judge Whitmore's expressions, his body language, the way he dismissed you." "Will I have to testify against him or something?" Amara asked. The thought made her tired. She just wanted to go home. "Possibly," Elena said, "but not right away. First, I need to gather evidence. I need to interview witnesses. I need to review the tape. I need to look at other cases he's presided over. This will take time. Weeks, probably months." Amara thought about Zara. She thought about their quiet routine, their breakfast conversations in French, their bedtime stories. She didn't want this hanging over her head for months. But then she thought about the next person who would stand before Judge Whitmore. The next person who wouldn't be able to defend themselves the way she had. "I'll do whatever you need me to do," Amara said firmly. Elena reached across the table and squeezed Amara's hand briefly. "Thank you. What you did today took courage. What you're agreeing to do now takes even more courage." They exchanged contact information. Elena gave Amara her business card. It was simple white cardstock with black letters. Elena Martinez, Senior Investigator, Judicial Conduct Office. There was a phone number and an email address. "Call me if you remember anything else," Elena said. "Or if Judge Whitmore or anyone associated with him tries to contact you." "Why would they contact me?" Amara asked. "They shouldn't," Elena said. "But sometimes people try to pressure complainants to withdraw their statements. Or they try to intimidate them. If anything like that happens, I need to know immediately." Amara nodded. She put the business card in her wallet. She said goodbye to Elena and walked out to the parking lot. The afternoon sun was bright. She had to squint. Her car was exactly where she left it. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. She drove to Zara's school. She was a few minutes late for pickup. Most of the other parents had already come and gone. Zara was sitting on a bench outside the school office with her backpack. When she saw Amara's car, her whole face lit up. She jumped up and ran to the car. "Aunt Amara!" Zara climbed into the back seat. "How did it go? Do I have to leave?" Amara turned around to look at her niece. Zara's eyes were wide and worried. She was trying to be brave, but Amara could see the fear underneath. "No, baby," Amara said softly. "You're staying with me, forever. The judge said so." Zara burst into tears. Happy tears. She unbuckled her seatbelt and threw her arms around Amara's neck from the back seat. "Really? Really truly?" "Really truly," Amara said. She hugged Zara tight. "You're stuck with me now." They drove home. Zara talked nonstop about her day. She had gotten a gold star on her spelling test. She had played kickball at recess. Her friend Madison had shared her cookies at lunch. Everything was normal and perfect in Zara's world again. That night, after dinner and homework and bath time, Amara tucked Zara into bed. She read her a story about a brave princess who could talk to animals. Zara's eyes grew heavy. Her breathing slowed down. "And Amara?" Zara whispered in the dark. "Yes, sweetie. I love you. I love you too, Zara, so much. Are you happy?" Amara thought about the question. She was happy that Zara was safe. She was happy they could stay together. But she was also thinking about Judge Whitmore. She was thinking about Elena Martinez and the investigation. She was thinking about all the work ahead. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm happy." Zara smiled and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Amara went to her own room. She changed into pajamas. She brushed her teeth. She got into bed. But she couldn't sleep. Her mind was too active. She kept replaying the day's events. The way Judge Whitmore had looked at her. The way he had laughed. The satisfaction she felt when his face changed. The way the courtroom had applauded. Her phone buzzed. It was a text message from David Chen, her lawyer. "Congratulations again. You were amazing today. If you need anything, I'm here." She texted back a quick thank you. Then there was another text. This one was from a number she didn't recognize. "Dr. Johnson, this is Maria Rodriguez. I was the court interpreter today. I want you to know that I'm going to speak with the investigator. What Judge Whitmore did today was wrong. He's done similar things before. It's time someone stood up to him. Thank you for your courage." Amara saved Maria's number. She sent back a message thanking her. Over the next few days, Amara tried to return to normal life. She taught her classes. She picked up Zara from school. They did homework together. They cooked dinner. They read stories. But in the back of her mind, she was always thinking about the investigation. 2 weeks after the hearing, Elena Martinez called her. "Dr. Johnson, I wanted to update you. I've interviewed the court reporter, the bailiff, and the interpreter. They've all confirmed your account of what happened. They've also shared information about other cases where they witnessed similar behavior from Judge Whitmore." "That's good, right?" Amara asked. "It's very good," Elena said. "But there's more. I requested security footage from the courtroom that day. I've watched it 3 times now. Dr. Johnson, it's even more damning than I expected. You can clearly see his facial expressions, the way he smirked, the way he rolled his eyes when your lawyer presented your credentials. The way he leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed when you started speaking Spanish. 3 months passed. During that time, Amara's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Zara was doing well in school. Her grades were good. She had made several close friends. Her therapy sessions were going well. Dr. Mitchell said Zara was processing her grief in healthy ways. She still had sad days, but the happy days were becoming more frequent. Amara had also made changes to her life. She was enjoying teaching more now that she had reduced her travel. She spent her evenings with Zara instead of preparing for international conferences. On weekends, they went to the park or the library or the children's museum. They were building memories together. But in the background, the investigation into Judge Whitmore continued. Elena Martinez called every few weeks with updates. More people had come forward with complaints. The evidence was mounting. The Judicial Review Board had scheduled a formal hearing. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist got hold of the story. Her name was Rachel Kim. She worked for a local news station. She had sources in the courthouse who told her about the investigation. She requested the security footage through a public records request. The courthouse had to give it to her. Rachel called Amara. "Dr. Johnson, I'm working on a story about Judge Whitmore. I've seen the courtroom video from your custody hearing. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" Amara hesitated. She didn't want to be on television. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to live her quiet life with Zara. "I understand your reluctance," Rachel said. "But this story is important. Judge Whitmore has been treating people unfairly for years. The public has a right to know. And your story is powerful. You stood up to him. You proved him wrong. That's inspiring." "Let me think about it," Amara said. She talked to Elena Martinez first. Elena said it was Amara's choice. The investigation would continue regardless. But media attention might put pressure on the review board to take the case seriously. She talked to David Chen. He thought it was a good idea. He said it could help other people who had been treated unfairly by judges. It could spark conversations about bias in the legal system. Finally, she talked to Zara's therapist. Dr. Mitchell said that as long as Zara was kept out of it and Amara didn't feel traumatized by sharing her story, it could be positive. It could show Zara that speaking up against injustice was important. Amara agreed to the interview. Rachel came to her home with a camera crew. They filmed in Amara's living room. Rachel asked thoughtful questions. She asked about Amara's background. She asked about the custody hearing. She asked how it felt when Judge Whitmore laughed at her. "I felt small," Amara said honestly. "I felt like all my accomplishments meant nothing. Like everything I had worked for my entire life could be dismissed because of how I looked or where I came from. But then I remembered something my mother used to tell me. She said, 'Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are.' So I stood tall and I proved him wrong." The interview aired on the evening news. Then it got picked up by national news networks. Then it went viral on social media. Within days, millions of people had watched the video of Amara speaking 9 languages in the courtroom. The video of Judge Whitmore's face changing from smug to shocked became a meme. People online were outraged. They couldn't believe a judge would behave that way. They praised Amara for her grace and intelligence. They demanded accountability for Judge Whitmore. The story kept growing. Other people who had appeared before Judge Whitmore started sharing their experiences online. A Hispanic man said the judge had questioned his immigration status even though he was born in the United States. A Muslim woman said the judge had made her remove her hijab in court for no legal reason. A young black man said the judge had given him a harsher sentence than a white defendant who committed the same crime. The patterns were clear. Judge Whitmore had been abusing his power for years, and now finally everyone could see it. The Judicial Review Board moved up their hearing date. They wanted to address the situation quickly because of the public attention. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the same courthouse where Amara's custody case had been held. Amara attended the hearing. So did Elena Martinez, the court reporter, the bailiff, Maria Rodriguez, and the 6 other complainants. The room was packed with journalists and members of the public. Judge Whitmore sat at a table with his lawyer. He looked older than he had 3 months ago. His face was gray. His shoulders were slumped. The review board consisted of 5 members, 3 judges from other districts, a lawyer, and a community member. They had reviewed all the evidence. They had watched the videos. They had read the transcripts. They had heard from dozens of witnesses. The head of the review board, Judge Patricia Williams, spoke first. She was a black woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes. We are here to determine whether Judge Harold Whitmore violated the Judicial Code of Conduct. We have examined evidence spanning the past 15 years of his service. What we found is deeply troubling. She went through the findings. There were 23 documented cases where Judge Whitmore had shown bias based on race, gender, religion, or socioeconomic status. There were 15 cases where his rulings appeared to be influenced by prejudice rather than law. There were 8 cases where he had made inappropriate comments in court. Judge Whitmore, Judge Williams said, "You took an oath to uphold justice fairly and impartially. You failed to do that. You allowed your personal biases to affect your judgments. You treated people differently based on factors that should have no bearing on justice." Judge Whitmore's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that he made mistakes. He asked for the opportunity to make amends. He's willing to undergo training. He's willing to do community service. He asked that you consider his 30 years of service to the court." Judge Williams looked at Judge Whitmore directly. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Judge Whitmore stood up slowly. He looked at the review board. Then he looked at Amara. His eyes met hers for just a moment. She saw something there. "Shame, maybe, regret, I apologize," he said. His voice was quiet. "I have allowed my assumptions and prejudices to cloud my judgment. I have failed the people who came before me seeking justice. I have failed the judicial system. I am deeply sorry it wasn't enough. Apologies couldn't undo the harm he had caused. But it was something." The review board deliberated for 2 hours. When they came back, Judge Williams announced their decision. "Judge Harold Whitmore, we are giving you 2 options. You can retire immediately with mandatory completion of 100 hours of bias training and a public apology, or you can face formal disbarment proceedings. You have 24 hours to decide." Judge Whitmore chose retirement. 1 week later, he held a press conference. It was held in a small conference room at a hotel. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras lined the back wall. Judge Whitmore read from a prepared statement. His hand shook slightly as he held the paper. "I am announcing my retirement from the bench effective immediately. I want to apologize to everyone I treated unfairly during my time as a judge. I let my personal biases affect my decisions. I judged people based on their appearance, their background, and my own assumptions, rather than on the facts of their cases. This was wrong. It was a betrayal of my oath and a failure of my duty." He looked up from the paper. "I want to specifically apologize to Dr. Amara Johnson. My behavior in her custody hearing was inexcusable. I doubted her credentials and questioned her abilities based on nothing but prejudice. She proved me wrong in every way possible. She showed dignity and grace when I showed her disrespect. I am sorry." He answered a few questions from reporters. Then he left through a side door. Amara watched the press conference on TV at home. Zara was at school. Amara sat on her couch and watched this powerful man admit he was wrong. It didn't feel triumphant. It just felt necessary. Life went on. Judge Whitmore disappeared from public view. He completed his bias training. He did his community service hours at a legal aid clinic, helping low-income people with their paperwork. He kept his head down. He didn't do any more interviews. Amara's life changed in unexpected ways. The viral video had made her famous, in a sense. She was invited to speak at conferences about bias in the legal system. Universities asked her to give talks about linguistic diversity and education. A publisher contacted her about writing a book. She was hesitant at first. She didn't want to be known as that woman from the video. But then she realized she could use this platform for good. She could talk about the issues that mattered to her. She could inspire other people who face discrimination. She wrote a book. It was called Speaking Truth in Every Language. It was part memoir, part educational guide about language learning and cultural diversity. It became a bestseller. The money from the book gave her financial security she'd never had before. With some of that money, she started a foundation, the Zara Johnson Language Education Foundation, named after her niece. The foundation provided free language classes to children from low-income families. It gave scholarships to students who wanted to study languages in college. It trained teachers in culturally responsive education. Zara was thriving. She was now 8 years old and learning her 3rd language. She was fluent in English, conversational in French, and starting to learn Spanish.